Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Deep Dive. I'm Hari, your host as always, and today we've got a really interesting story to dig into. We're going to be looking at a crime, a mystery, and really a story that kind of continues to this day, so hopefully you'll find it as fascinating as I do. And joining me to do just that is our expert, Kimi. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here. I think this is a case with a ton of twists and turns, and yeah, it's got a little bit of everything, so it should be fun to unpack.
Okay, so to set the stage a little bit before we really jump into it, we're going to be looking at the Northern Bank robbery, which took place in Belfast in 2004. And just to give you a sense of scale right off the bat, this heist resulted in the theft of £26.5 million, which is an incredible sum of money. And one of the things that makes this story so compelling is that despite numerous arrests and convictions related to the case, the actual robbers themselves have never been caught.
Yeah, it really is a mystery that has kind of lingered for almost 2 decades now. And, there have been all sorts of theories and speculation, but the bottom line is we still don't know for sure who is behind it all.
It's almost like a perfect crime in a way, at least for the people who actually planned and carried it out. So to understand how this all went down, we need to go back to the setting. The Northern Bank, which was the largest bank in Northern Ireland at the time, had a unique characteristic in that they were actually able to print their own banknotes.
And that detail is really key because it adds a whole other layer of complexity to the story.
Right.
When you think about trying to launder that much money, especially when a good chunk of it is in freshly printed, easily traceable banknotes, it creates a huge challenge for the perpetrators.
It seems like they were playing with fire a little bit, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. Before we jump into the money laundering aspect, let's rewind to the night before the robbery, December 19th, 2004. This is where things start to get really interesting. Two employees of the Northern Bank, Chris Ward and his supervisor, Kevin McMullen, were targeted in a very specific and calculated way.
Yeah, picture this. It's late at night. Groups of armed men approach the homes of these two bank employees in separate locations. Chris Ward in Downpatrick and Kevin McMullen in Polglass. And what happens next is truly terrifying. Both of them and their families are taken hostage.
Wow. So they actually took their families hostage. That's a whole other level of ruthlessness and really speaks to the planning and the lengths these criminals were willing to go to.
It was a bold move and a really crucial part of their plan. By taking the families hostage, they were essentially ensuring the cooperation of Ward and McMullen, forcing them to become unwitting accomplices in the robbery. The family's safety was on the line, so these two bank employees were under immense pressure to comply with the robbers' demands.
That must have been absolutely terrifying for everyone involved. Okay, so we have these two bank employees and their families held hostage the night before the robbery. What happens next? How does this plan actually unfold?
Well, the next day, Ward and McMullen are instructed to go to work as usual, acting completely normal, like nothing is wrong. They're given mobile phones by the robbers and are in constant communication with them throughout the day, receiving instructions and making sure everything is in place for the heist.
It's like something straight out of a movie. This level of control and manipulation is incredible.
It really is. They even had Ward do a test run earlier in the day to make sure he would follow instructions. He was told to fill a bag with £1 million in large denomination notes and leave it at a designated bus stop. One of the robbers picked it up without a hitch. It was a way for them to test the waters and make sure everything was going according to plan.
£1 million test run. That's insane. So the stage is set, the hostages are in place, and the robbers have confirmed that their plan is working. What happens when the bank closes for the day?
That's when the main event goes down. As the bank is closing, Ward and McMullen are instructed to load crates filled with banknotes onto trolleys. Under the watchful eyes of the security staff, they make multiple trips from the basement to the bank's bullion bay where cash deliveries were typically made.
So they're just wheeling out millions of pounds right under everyone's noses. It's brilliant in a twisted kind of way.
Exactly. They had a white van waiting outside, and they even got clearance from security to enter the bullion bay. It was all very carefully orchestrated to look like a routine task. Nobody suspected a thing.
And with that, they disappear into the night with £26.5 million in cash. Just like that.
Well, not quite. It's not as simple as just driving off with the money. The haul consisted of freshly printed Northern banknotes, used Northern banknotes, and even used notes from other banks. This mix of currency presented both opportunities and challenges when it came to actually laundering the money.
Okay, so that's where we're going to pick things up in the next part. We've got millions of pounds stolen, a complex web of players, and the mystery of who is truly behind it all is still unsolved. We'll dig into all of that and more when we come back, so stay tuned.
All right, so we left off with the robbers making a clean getaway with millions of pounds in cash. But as you can imagine, the story doesn't end there. The real challenge for them begins now. How do you clean up that much dirty money, especially when you've got a mix of freshly printed banknotes that are practically screaming stolen?
Yeah, that's the part that always fascinates me. The money laundering aspect. That's like a
Yeah.
whole other world with its own rules and players. And it's crucial to understanding how these large-scale criminal operations actually function.
Exactly. And in the case of the Northern Bank robbery, the investigation into the money laundering operation was just as complex and intriguing as the heist itself. It involved multiple jurisdictions, international connections, and a whole cast of characters who were all trying to make the stolen money disappear.
It's like a giant puzzle with all these pieces scattered across different countries and financial institutions.
Precisely. And the authorities were under immense pressure to not only track down the money, but also to figure out who was involved and bring them to justice. This robbery had sent shockwaves through Northern Ireland and beyond, and there was a real sense of urgency to get to the bottom of it.
So let's talk about that investigation. Where did they even begin?
Sure.
How do you start unraveling a money laundering scheme of this magnitude?
Well, the police immediately launched a full-scale investigation dedicating a significant amount of resources to the case. They knew they were dealing with a sophisticated operation, and they had to be strategic in their approach.
I can only imagine the pressure they were under. This wasn't just any ordinary robbery.
Huh?
This had the potential to destabilize the peace process in Northern Ireland.
You're absolutely right. The political implications were huge, the stakes were incredibly high, and investigators knew that every move they made would be scrutinized.
So what were some of the early leads they were following? Did they have any idea who might be behind this?
While suspicion quickly fell upon the Provisional IRA, a paramilitary group that had been active during the Troubles. While there wasn't any immediate evidence directly linking them to the robbery, there were several factors that pointed in their direction.
Okay, I can see why that would be a natural assumption. Given their history and their capabilities, it wouldn't be far-fetched to think they might be involved in something like this.
And as the investigation progressed, certain details emerged that seemed to support this theory. One key figure who came into focus was Ted Cunningham, a financial advisor based in County Cork. He was later convicted of laundering a portion of the stolen money.
Ah, yes, Ted Cunningham. His name is pretty much synonymous with this whole case. Wasn't there some controversy surrounding his conviction, though?
There was indeed. He was initially found guilty of laundering over £3 million connected to the robbery and sentenced to 10 years in prison. However, his conviction was later overturned on appeal, only to be reinstated again in a subsequent trial.
It's a real legal roller coaster. What was the prosecution's case against him? What evidence did they have linking him to the robbery?
Well, a key part of their case was Cunningham's connection to individuals with known IRA affiliations. This link strengthened the suspicion that the IRA was involved in the robbery and that Cunningham was playing a role in cleaning up the proceeds.
So we have a direct link between the stolen money and someone connected to the IRA. That seems pretty damning.
It was a significant development in the investigation, and there were also reports that Garda surveillance had captured Jerry Adams, the leader of Sinn Féin, meeting with Cunningham just weeks before the robbery.
Well, hold on. Jerry Adams meeting with a financial advisor who's later convicted of laundering money from a massive bank heist. That can't be a coincidence.
It certainly raised eyebrows and fueled speculation about Sinn Féin's potential involvement. However, both Adams and Sinn Féin vehemently denied any knowledge of or involvement in the robbery. They dismissed the allegations as politically motivated attempts to undermine their party and damage the peace process.
It's a classic case of he said, she said, with each side presenting their own narrative. It's hard to know who to believe.
Exactly, and that ambiguity only added to the intrigue of the case. But despite these allegations, the police couldn't definitively prove IRA involvement, so they had to continue their investigation, exploring other angles and following the money trail wherever it led them. All right, so we've been talking about the investigation, the money laundering, the key players, but I think it's important to zoom out a little bit and consider the broader context in which this robbery took place.
Yeah, we can't really understand the full impact of this event without acknowledging the historical backdrop. The Troubles, as they're known, cast a long shadow over Northern Ireland for decades, and that legacy of conflict is essential to grasping the significance of this robbery.
Exactly. The Troubles were a period of intense sectarian conflict that gripped Northern Ireland for roughly 30 years, from the late 1960s to the late 1990s. And it was marked by violence, political instability, deep divisions within society. It was a really turbulent time.
So for our listeners who might not be as familiar with this period, can you paint a picture of what life was like during the Troubles? What were the root causes of this conflict?
At the heart of the conflict was a fundamental disagreement about the future of Northern Ireland. You had the predominantly Catholic nationalists who wanted a united Ireland and the predominantly Protestant Unionists who wanted to remain part of the United Kingdom.
So it was this clash of ideologies, this question of national identity that fueled decades of unrest and violence.
Yes, and tragically, this conflict played out in many different ways. From peaceful protests and civil disobedience to acts of violence and terrorism perpetrated by paramilitary groups on both sides, it was a complex and often brutal struggle that left a lasting impact on the region.
But it's within this context, this backdrop of conflict and lingering tensions that the Northern Bank robbery takes place.
Yeah.
We've already mentioned the IRA as a prime suspect, but
Yep.
can you talk a little bit more about their role in the Troubles and how they might have been involved in criminal activities?
So the Provisional IRA was a paramilitary group that emerged during the Troubles. They advocated for united Ireland and engaged in armed struggle to achieve that goal. And throughout this period, both loyalist and Republican paramilitary groups turned to criminal activities to finance their operations.
So it wasn't just about ideology. There was a very real financial element to the conflict as well.
Absolutely. Criminal activities like robberies, extortion, smuggling, they all became intertwined with the broader political struggle. It was a way for these groups to fund their activities and exert control within their communities.
It's a sad reality of conflict, isn't it? When violence becomes normalized, criminal activities often become a means to an end, and it creates a cycle that's very difficult to break.
And that's precisely the challenge that Northern Ireland faced in the aftermath of the Good Friday Agreement, a historic peace accord signed in 1998 that officially marked the end of the Troubles. While the agreement brought hope for lasting peace, the legacy of violence and mistrust continued to linger. And then you have this massive bank robbery with alleged ties to the IRA, which really throws a wrench into the peace process.
It's like taking 2 steps forward and 1 step back.
Yeah.
It must have been incredibly discouraging for those who were working so hard to build a peaceful future for Northern Ireland.
It was a major setback, and it highlighted just how fragile the peace was. The accusations against the IRA, whether true or not, had the potential to reignite old tensions and derail everything that had been achieved.
It's a reminder that peace is a process, a continuous effort that requires constant vigilance and a willingness to address the underlying causes of conflict. So as we wrap up our discussion of the Northern Bank robbery, what are some of the key takeaways that we want to leave our listeners with?
Well, I think this case serves as a powerful reminder that even in a world that strives for transparency and accountability, there are still secrets lurking in the shadows, mysteries that may never be fully solved. And sometimes we have to grapple with the fact that we may never know the full truth.
It's about embracing the ambiguity, recognizing that history is often messy, and that there are always multiple perspectives to consider.
Exactly. And beyond the mystery itself, I think the Northern Bank robbery underscores the importance of understanding the historical context in which events occur. We can't fully grasp the significance of an event without delving into its historical backdrop, the social, political, and economic forces that shaped it.
It's about connecting the dots, seeing the bigger picture, and understanding how the past continues to influence the present.
And finally, I think this case serves as a cautionary tale about the enduring legacy of conflict. The wounds of the past can run deep, and achieving lasting peace requires a commitment to justice, reconciliation, and addressing the root causes of division. It's an ongoing process, one that demands patience, understanding, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths.
It's been a fascinating and thought-provoking journey exploring the Northern Bank robbery with you today. A story that's captivated us with its intricate details, unanswered questions, and its profound impact on the Northern Ireland peace process. Thank you to Kimi for sharing your expertise and insights with us.
Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it sparked your curiosity and encouraged you to explore the complexities of history and conflict. We'll be back next time with another captivating story. Until then, keep questioning, keep exploring, and remember, sometimes the most intriguing stories are those that leave us with more questions than answers.